Josh had a rant saved up,
Yes,
so I want to hear
your
this
rant?
So let's in that aspect is
Go on.
you
Go.
I don't know. I mean, what was it? What's the word I'm looking for here?
Oh, I love Mr. Josh Brewer.
I just love
so
how
much.
that's unedited.
No, that is edited.
Oh, I thought that was unedited.
No.
Oh,
No, that was edited. That was me bringing a bunch of
Oh.
clips together because Josh, the first time you heard it, thought it was unedited.
Oh, okay.
He's
wow,
like,
see, I already
I
forgot.
don't remember doing that. I can't believe that was unedited. No, that was definitely edited.
Dang it.
Where I took a bunch of segments like that together and just.
Because I know you did that for yourself, but then I thought for whatever reason, I was like, no, Josh, you're just that special where I didn't have to edit it.
No, because if you notice, there are different times
It
in
was-
the background where you were making certain noises where all of a sudden that noise got cut off
okay,
as we moved on to a different clip.
Oh, I didn't pay attention that well.
Yeah.
Dang.
Aaron's like the little child in the back, bouncing in the background. It's like, could you see the difference? You know, it's one of those old, concentration things where you're paying attention, where you're told to pay attention to what's happening on stage. You know, you're told to pay attention to look for any changes in the actors, and then they trot out like someone in an Easter Bunny costume across the stage, and no one
nobody
notices
sees
it. Yep. That's exactly what it's like. You're paying attention so much to what Josh is doing, and no one notices the Aaron in the background going, or his new favorite thing, where it's that noise right there, which I finally found an example to cut and send him. And Aaron was like, "What?"
I couldn't believe I did that.
And I have so many examples of that. I think I might have an intro coming with just you doing.
No.
Yes, added. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyways, today we're on part 2 of this experiment. This experiment called Aaron's Book Club.
You know what?
It's ABC.
Gotta start somewhere.
1, 2, 3.
Oh my gosh.
That old song.
Whoa. Aaron's Book Club, ABC.
I said this last time too.
You did. You totally did.
And even the podcast episode title that went out, in case you didn't notice, it was ABC.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah. It was ABC Part 1 because Aaron's Book Club Part 1. Glad you pay attention so well, sir.
I don't.
I know. So last time we went through chapters 1 through 6 of what he must be if he wants to marry my daughter.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
And I remember saying that there were parts of the book in the first 6 chapters that started giving me room for pause. And those pauses became longer, pregnated pauses as I went through the second half of this book. And there are parts in here I'm like, yes, I agree with, and parts in here I'm going, no, I do not agree with 100%.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just me. I'm not as conservative as this guy is.
Got that right. I'm just kidding.
It very
don't
well
know.
could be.
I have no
Or
idea.
it could be other things. I don't know what those are.
Yeah.
And we will see what those are as we go through. And I'm interested to hear how some of your thoughts on some of those things are as well.
Oh boy.
So this again is the book, What He Must Be If He Wants to Marry My Daughter by Vody Bacham Jr. This was originally, well, at least this version was published, copyrighted 2009. And
Wow.
he would have been like his late 40s when he wrote this book at the time. So chapter 7, I read the title and I laughed.
Oh no, I don't remember what the title. Oh, yeah.
For 2 reasons.
Yeah.
2 reasons. One, I was like, oh, this definitely is not an Aaron thing.
What? I mean,
No, I'm kidding.
Maybe. I don't
No.
know.
So there was first that, and then secondly, because I've been watching Letterkenny recently, what do they talk about? Like one of the first things in the first episode. What's the funniest thing in the world to Wayne? It's watching children fall off of bikes.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of cracked up laughing just because of that. And yeah, I definitely do not recommend that show for anyone under the age of 18 at all. Not recommended. Language, and topics.
A lot of it.
Yeah. Maybe we'll discuss later why it was probably a bad idea for me to watch that show.
No, it's a great idea because now I remember it or know of it.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. But anyways, so I again, I read this and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
what he must be committed to children. And at first I'm thinking like, okay, what does this mean here? What does this mean by he must be committed to children? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to be walking into with this one.
Really?
And I figured the committed to having children one was going to be in there.
Yeah.
That one, like I was like, come on, that's going to be in there completely. Yeah. What kind of took me by surprise a little bit was his stance on the whole, woman working outside the home and men, not, working at home sort of deal. And I was like, interesting. He's really kind of taking that really hard course. He's like, well, this isn't true for everyone, but this is how it should be biblically. And I'm like,
I thought later on I didn't think he was that hardcore on that. At some point,
he's saying, it's not that a woman has to be confined to the home, but like some people will say and all that. But essentially, he's going back to his previous statement, that in the example that he had, where the woman goes, "Oh, I understand you're a preacher, but what are you doing here?" To the stay-at-home dad. It's going back to that thing again, saying essentially, he says, put simply, a suitor must have a commitment for providing for his family without depending on the mother of his children to hold down both household and an outside career. Read earlier, one of the things that he does in marriage counseling is he makes them draw up a budget with only one income.
Right.
Only his, not hers.
Yeah.
And then he has his little poem that he ends the chapter with, put the baby in the beamer that he wrote.
Wait. Oh, I guess I totally didn't even look that he wrote that.
Yeah, he says, I thought about that scene for the rest of my walk. As I did, a phrase kept coming to my mind. Eventually, that phrase became a poem.
Yeah.
And that phrase was, put the baby in the beamer. And what he's doing is he's talking about he was on the walk and he noticed, two people, a mother and a father. They were, relatively well off to do. They both had beamers, and it was like, and he was saying the house looked great that they were in. But he's talking that, it was before the sun was even up in Houston and it was still cold out. And he saw the cars warming up outside and he noticed that they were taking the kid putting them in the car while the kid was still asleep. Like the kid hadn't even woken up yet.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, what are you doing with your life? You're both working and all that.
Yeah.
So that's where that put the baby in the beamer. But yeah, right. He kind of was definitely, at least from my reading of it, was a lot more on the side of you're the man, you work, you provide, right. You're the woman, you
raise the kids at home.
And obviously he's like, sometimes, maybe you'll go out and teach a lesson here or there. He's like, oh, okay, that's fine. But other than that, he's like, how can you not live on one income? Which I say, have you seen American Prices recently?
Yeah, granted at the time, yeah.
Well, when he wrote this, right?
It was still pretty rough though, wasn't it?
It was during the previous recession under Obama.
Yeah.
So at the time, gas prices were pretty high.
Gosh, was it that long ago when Obama was president?
What years was he president? 08 through
crap.
End of 15, start of 16.
Yeah.
And then Trump was 16 to 20.
Oh my goodness, time. Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Time is crazy.
Time goes by, because you can be president if you're elected twice, for 2 terms, 8 years. So that was Obama's time. So at the time, and he's complaining in here about him filling up his truck for
$96. Yeah,
$96, and I'm sitting there laughing.
You should see my tank now, boy.
I'm filling up my vehicle for 50 some bucks, and so I can't even imagine, a full size pickup truck. And I'm just like, ooh, boy. But we'll get to that in a little bit as well, about some of the other things that happen in those chapters. But why are you going?
I'm still thinking about the weekend I spent $180 on gas.
Yeah. But
rough.
Yeah, just going through this chapter, obviously it's essentially what he's trying to get at is whoever his daughter is going to marry must want children, and must want to father children,
Right.
and must want to work so much that they provide for their children, which, don't get me wrong, that is great. I'm all for that, but I don't know. He seems a little on the more only the man works in this chapter than
right.
what I was saying earlier.
I remember having it. The group was talking that I originally read this with. We had a discussion a little bit on that. I was reading it, and I was like, because there's nothing wrong with a woman working. I guess I just imagine during the time as for a baby that's growing, it's probably very important for the mom to stay with the baby for so long,
Right.
Which I guess, obviously there's daycares and stuff like that. How some people take that, they just take it too far of an extreme, because it's like you can find a daycare, especially if you're a Christian, I'm sure you can find a daycare that will, be good for them to go to, I suppose. I'd hope. I don't know. I'm not a parent. I don't know these things. I haven't looked into this stuff.
Okay.
But it's like you still have how much time with your kids outside of work once you're back home with your kids again to continue raising them and teaching them stuff. So I guess it's just depending on finding that time of when would it be okay. And I guess that probably would depend on case to case as far as to when are you okay with them being at a daycare kind of thing. And,
right.
Having,
it's kind of that balancing act that you got to have between it, and the one thing I'll get on him about on this book, or this chapter, I should say, not this book at all, but in this chapter, he's like, oh yes, the father must go and he must be the one to provide all the money for all the children. Okay, whatever. But then they must also be the ones to nurture the children, and provide guidance for the children, outside, like what, the wife does, the mother does, and that I'm like, okay. I'm just like, which is it that you want them to do? There's only so many hours in the day. I get it, so I'm like,
right. I guess
as I say, it's easier if they're both working to have that balancing act, because then, you don't have to worry about, am I having the job enough to, make enough money and all that to provide for all the children. It's like, okay, the wife's working, but we have the kid in daycare as well, maybe,
I guess I think I also think of trying to a point and live off of one's salary is probably better, besides the whole kid thing, as to what happens when one of the people gets, one of the man or husband or wife, what if one of them gets laid off,
right?
And then they have to go so long. I mean, now obviously that there's a whole thing about savings and stuff like that, but it's like, if something like that happens and you're used to living off of two incomes,
it can be rough for a while.
It could be extremely rough for a long time, depending on how things recover, if things do.
Yeah. But I also look at it this way. If you're relying on one income, right?
And
then they get laid off, you're even...
Well, then you're even... Well, yeah. But, no.
You're in a worse spot than if you were in...
If you're living off of one income, but both people are working...
Oh, I see.
That's what I'm
see
thinking of.
So
If both are working but you're still living off of one income,
then yes.
you have so much more money to save up.
But yeah, this Vody Bokum would still be like, no, don't do that. I was thinking when I was hearing that, I was thinking
of
one person working one income sort of deal.
Okay, no, it's still living off of one income
Yeah.
mostly, but still allowing both people to work, because then one can work on the savings and one can work on the bills, or just divide it up however you want. I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow, I wish I only listened to my own financial advice sometimes.
It's a lot easier to give it than to listen to it, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yep. I get it there. So, yeah, any other thoughts on he must be committed to children other than the fact that he gives a very long example of someone who like goes overboard on his children. Like Tozer.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
Where Tozer eventually, so what it is in the beginning, Tozer's like kind of traveling all over, kind of almost neglecting his family, to be honest.
No, he was. Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
At the end, he doted on his daughter. Like he did like a
weird.
180, but it was a 180 obsession with his daughter so much that it was over his wife, and that where he was he was writing his daughter letters and not his wife while he was on the road.
Yeah, that's messed up.
And I was like,
there's something funky going on there.
Yeah,
in my mind.
I'd
imagine in most people's mind would think
it was just like, but it was an example of how you can go too far in either direction as well,
right?
Where you have to have that balance.
I mean, there was but kind of going from the other opposite end. There's the whole thing about the couples that got married but then ended up getting divorced because the man would not budge on the thought of not having kids.
Right.
Which yeah, I know. I mean, I guess I would say biblically, if you end up getting married, you should have kids. I thought there was a verse in there talking about maybe not in this that he mentioned in the chapter, but talking about whole man, woman come together and then, populate the earth kind of thing, whatever. Although the earth is already well populated, but
yeah, he refers to the wonderful Psalm 127 verse.
Oh, okay, that's not what I'm thinking.
Oh, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb of reward, like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Yeah. Blessed is a man who fills his quiver with them.
Yeah, so then I liked how he kind of broke some of that down in the different translations, and then how the ESV is made it more of a proactive sounding thing versus just a passive verse, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I thought, I'll have to look for that at some point. The one thing that I thought was weird was his whole thing, his paragraph where he's talking about, it's a rarity now to have big families and stuff like that. And I was just like, as far as I know, there's nothing that tells you need to have a big family in the Bible.
Right. He's probably pointing back to that Psalm verse, filling the quiver with arrows, but it's like, aka children.
Because it's like you can go to a point where it's just it's irresponsible for how many kids you can have, where it's
right. Because let's say I'm not making a comment on you, Aaron, on this, right?
Okay.
But someone like you, if you followed his advice and you lived only on the man's salary, so on your salary only,
okay, I have a lot of selling of stuff to do.
Yeah, but let's say you found a wife, and you're living on your salary from your speed rap stuff.
Woo!
Okay.
We live in a shack.
Having 10 children would be irresponsible.
Absolutely.
To the children.
Having 8 kids right now would be irresponsible financially.
Okay, fair enough. But what I'm saying is, it would be irresponsible in the fact that you would give them a very low quality of life. Yes, they would be alive. Yes, there would be another child. But do you bring a child into the world just to have a child, or do you bring a child in where you can actually, provide? I'm not saying you have to grant them the greatest of luxuries. I'm saying where you bring them in and be like, you have you have food on the table.
Right. You have the necessities.
You're not freezing when it goes into winter mode in that. It's where you're actually able to live. That's an actual fair thought and a fair thing to plan in a fair conversation, which is why, like I said, this chapter was probably the chapter that started turning me away from this book. But we'll
Right.
continue going on down that path on why I started going, no, no, no. Oh, goodness gracious, no.
Yeah.
So that was chapter 7. Chapter 8. What else do you got?
I think this is still in 7. There was a couple. Yeah, this is still 7 because it's only a couple pages after.
Okay.
There was just a couple of things I underlined. I feel like that were more on the convicting side. On page 129, I have I had this one underlined from the get-go, and then I underlined something else my second time going through it.
Mhm.
First one, though, is he who tolerates evil, which it is his province to suppress, is an accomplice, and the blood of the doers is red on his hands. That sounds very scary.
Yep. And this is actually in reference back to Eli and his sons.
Yes.
That's what they're referencing back to.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for bringing that in there. Yep.
That was back, I believe that's from 1 Samuel 3. I believe they're talking
Yeah,
about that.
correct.
Yeah, so and then he adds his own little commentary. Woe to the young woman who is blind to this kind of passivity in a potential suitor.
Oh, yeah.
I'm like,
it's very dramatic.
like, dude, you're getting a little too involved in your daughter's love life. But that's more to come on that. No, and we may disagree on that. I don't know. We'll see when
Yeah.
we get there. Go on.
I guess no. I wonder, like, depending on how old the kid is, that's where, for me, it's drawing a line. Or like if they're young and just getting into the whole thing of love and stuff like that, it's like you want to be.
He was doing this still with his 18-year-old plus daughter.
Oh, I don't. Oh,
Yeah, we'll get into that later on because that's covered in other chapters, and that's
how
where
did
he
I
started to
miss
lose me
that?
greatly.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, great."
Ooh. Okay.
But anyways, go on.
What was the other? Oh. And this does kind of come back to, I guess, was this stuff with Tozer?
Okay, Tozer.
But it was, he actually believed that God would bring his children back to the faith because he had neglected them for the sake of his ministry.
Right. So what and this is going back to Tozer and all of his
Yeah.
thing where he essentially neglected his family.
Yes.
And he essentially thought that because he was serving God so well and so much and doing all these things for God, that if his children left the faith, that
He'd just
God
bring
would bring
them
them
right
back. Instead of being like, oh, wait, they're my children. I need to intervene and
Right.
talk to them.
I need to be a father to these kids.
Yeah.
No. Apparently not. Yeah. No, okay, so that's the end of that.
Okay. Okay, cool. So then we
8.
go into chapter 8. And
I was mad reading through this again. Is the last one 2 of the 4 P's or
Yes.
Okay, that's okay. I was like, wait, where's the 4th freaking P?
So, well, he tells you right away.
Yeah, he does. I know.
Again, all of his
Just
chapters
skim
follow the
through.
same format. He's going to tell you what he's going to tell you. He tells you it, and then he tells you what he told you.
Yeah.
So all of his chapters follow that same format. So if you read right away in here, right?
Yeah.
Trying to find exactly where it is, but he
Yeah.
talks about the 4 P's being that of. Oh, I'm sorry. It's in the intro here.
Yeah.
Every governor of a family
yeah.
ought to look upon himself as obliged to act in 3 capabilities: as a prophet to instruct, as a priest to pray for and with, as a king to govern, direct, and provide for them. And essentially that turns into the 4 P's, which are protector,
Yep. Provider, prophet, and priest.
prophet, and priest. Yep. Yeah, because the first time I went through 2, I was like, wait, there's 3. Where's the 4th one? Where's the 4th one? I'm lost on this.
Yeah.
One. Yeah. So as he says, as fathers, we have been charged by God to be priest, prophet, provider, and protector in the lives of our daughters. Before we can give our daughters away to another, we must be sure that each of our duties in our daughters' lives will be carried out by the one to whom we entrust them. And then he talks about, how he literally believe he. So I'll just go read it. I'm
Uh-huh.
not because trying to summarize it, not as good as just reading what he says.
Read it.
Contrary to popular belief and contemporary practice, the Bible makes it clear that fathers are to give their daughters in marriage, not send them off and hope they come back with a good one. Remember that because that comes back later on in the next chapter
Wow.
where
Man, I'm so glad I'm doing this with you because there's so much I missed.
yeah, there's things in here that I'm reading and I'm like, I could never do this if I had a kid to them
Mm-hmm.
because to make it simple, essentially this guy is kind of the mindset, and this is part of the last chapter, not the outro, but the last chapter of it, where it's the guy before you even date has to go, "Sir, I am interested in your daughter. May I date her?" And then he goes, I see your shortcomings in here, here, and here. I'm going to train you in these things first before you can date my daughter."
See, that would
And then their dates essentially consist of always being in the house with the parents only,
right,
never on their own.
right.
So, like I said,
It would be interesting to hear their response to how he raised them. I mean, they're probably going to be
especially now because remember this is 09 when the
right,
kids were 18.
right. So it'd be interesting to hear how either they
How
think
that
it was
went,
good or not, or
where the marriages are still going strong or not.
right.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing too, is like when I'm reading this, it does make there's been times where it's like when I'm reading this, I'm like, man, I'm just gonna toss in the towel now and just forget about it. But then at the same time, it's just like no one's ever gonna be, if as far as like to this guy's standards or just biblical standards, no one's ever gonna be fully ready for, I guess, marriage in that sense, biblically, by a biblical standard. Going into it, that's all stuff that gets fleshed out as time goes on.
Yeah. So
I don't know.
So let's go through the 4 P's that he talks about.
Yeah.
Unless you have anything in the intro segment reference. Okay.
No.
So the first one must be a protector. Okay.
Yes.
I was like, okay, cool. He says the basic of these requirements is that of protection. He must assume the role as protector of woman. And then he goes on and talks, and in a way, this is also a review again about some previous chapters because he goes on to talk about how women are the weaker vessel according to Peter and all that other stuff, and just talking about some examples through it, specifically this Dr. Roland Taylor of Hadley and how he essentially protected, and then some I guess you could say not the subcontext, the sub qualities of being a protector, such as personal holiness, true gentleness, great resolve, was genuine compassion, true bravery. Those are subcomponents of protection where, they all combine and are a part of it. And you need all of them together as well. So, it's the 4 P's with all the subpoints inside of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So go on.
I'm hung up on that whole the weaker vessel thing.
Why are you hung up about that?
Because it's like, I guess overall, I mean, I guess, yeah, men are, I guess, physically stronger than women.
Mm-hmm.
It just brought me back to a time I remember in like elementary school or something. I don't know. It was like one of those early grade school levels, whatever. There was this one girl in class who was fairly strong. And I remember there's like a whole competition against like what guys could actually beat her in an arm wrestle. That was always funny. A lot of them lost. but that's also baby age.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, like, because I mean, now to say that today, whoof, that's offensive, or just very, I guess, wrong in today's eyes. I
Today's
suppose.
society and culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does say, this isn't meant to be a derogatory thing. He's like, it's
Right.
just, just by nature, men tend to be.
Now, is that also because I was just wondering, is that as far as the whole weaker vessel thing goes, is that just both physically and emotionally, or I guess I've been trying to wonder. I was like, where does that lie? I guess as a whole versus just one aspect of men and women.
Yeah, probably more on that physical side, and
Yeah.
and now don't get me wrong, people have misused that reference in the past,
Mm-hmm.
as sort of like, oh, they can be in full control of a woman and maybe even abuse someone. That's not what it's meaning at all.
No.
It literally is going at the biological fact that in general there are exceptions to the rule, but
Right.
in general, men are usually bigger and stronger than women, and women usually a little bit smaller, and typically shorter, less muscular than men.
Yeah.
There are exceptions. There definitely are
Right.
exceptions to that, and you see that especially, and they're in, like the women's powerlifting and all that. And you're like, okay,
Yeah. she
definitely not the weaker one. She could beat me to a
Yeah.
bloody pulp.
Yeah.
But it's not saying that they're weaker spiritually or
Oh, no.
emotionally or
Okay.
anything like that. It's just
Yeah.
in general, physically,
Right.
that's what it tends to be.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's the general rule. There are
Are
exceptions
exceptions.
to it.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's what I was doing with that, and then essentially he uses Dr. Rowland Taylor of Hadley. And so he's from Fox's Book of Martyrs. That's where that story comes from. And he basically uses that for a good chunk of the rest of the book here for this first P for protection
Yeah.
and showing kind of how he helped, protect his family and all that through things. So essentially like under resolve, right? It says when Taylor knew he was to be martyred, he sent a book to his son with his son to his wife and children. At the end of the book, he had an incredible statement that gives us a glimpse into his resolve. I say to my wife and to my children, the Lord gave you unto me, and the Lord hath taken me from you, and you from me. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I believe that they are blessed which die in the Lord. God careth for sparrows and for the hairs of our heads. I have ever found him more faithful and favorable than is any father or husband. Sorry, my brain's like short circuited with that wording. There. I was like, wait a minute. What? Trust ye therefore in him by means of our dear Savior Christ's merits. Believe, love, fear, and obey him. Pray to him, for he hath promised to help. Count me not dead, for I shall certainly live and never die. I go before, and you shall follow after to our long home. Our Old English is archaic at times. It's just hard to read.
It's tough.
But, that's a statement, he knew he was going to die, and he sent that with his son back to his wife and the rest of his children as kind of his final message to them.
Mm.
But through it all, he showed his resolve of like, hey, I know what's going to happen to me. I know what's going to happen, and I'm good with it. And hey, I won't be here to protect you anymore, but hey, he basically says, hey, believe in God, pray to God, trust in him on what's going to happen next.
Right. There was one thing that just kind of like looking through, I was like, oh wait, there's stuff that I must have underlined from before that I forgot about. But one
Okay.
thing that had stuck out to me was when he's talking about like gentleness and stuff.
Yeah.
I've never thought of I guess of it this way, where on page 144 I just have a section underlined where it says gentleness is strength under control.
Mm-hmm.
Never thought of that way. I always thought of gentle just being soft and being nice.
Right, but
to a point, but I guess I've never thought of the whole thing strength being under control.
Yeah, because
aspect
you
of
know
it.
what you're able to do, what you're capable of, And for example, me and you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know I could easily do some things that would either hurt you or really wound you or destroy you mentally, emotionally, maybe physically,
I'm
whatever, right?
scared of you now. I'm just kidding.
But gentleness is knowing that strength, knowing what you can do,
Yeah.
and instead choosing to be gentle, quote unquote,
Yeah.
be kind, be controlled around that person, even though you could easily
Just
exactly
nail. Give him a
exactly.
good one too.
It's one of those things of you could easily look at like a law enforcement or a judge or whatever. They could easily throw the book at someone. That's more grace. Where you could throw the book at someone, but it kind of ties into that gentleness where you could just yell at them, scream at them for what they did wrong, and instead they could sit down, talk with you in a calm voice,
Yeah.
explain to you what you did wrong and how to correct it.
Yeah.
They're not coming from a position of weakness. They're coming from a position of strength, saying, I have the law behind me saying you broke it. You did something wrong. Here's why you did it wrong. And here's how to fix it so you don't do this again.
Mm. 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 Man.
So if you look on top of page 145, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's literally the first
Yeah.
chunk of text.
Yeah.
It goes,
Yeah.
imagine that a man who is void of all rancor, grudge, or evil will, and yet stout in rebuking the sinful and evildoers. This is a portrait of manhood that's desperately needed in our day. In other words, someone who is not doing evil, who is not, I don't know what, whatever you consider rancor and grudge, whatever you want to, a dirty man or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But yet is still stern in saying no to what is evil going on. That's
Mm-hmm.
what's talking about. In other words, you can be stern, you can be strict, you can tell things no that are and call things wrong that are wrong without falling into those things,
Right.
without falling into being that.
Yeah.
So
That's tough to do, especially
it is.
Especially when the good old emotions start to get a hold of you.
Exactly. By the way, I love it's at the end of the protector thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, and again, this is where he's starting to lose me in this book. How can a young woman hear stories of men like Rowland Taylor and find weak, selfish, godless men attractive? I was like,
easily.
I was like, all right.
You telling me that you never found
I was like,
godless women very attractive?
I was like, look around. Women like the
They like the danger
the
side
danger
of
guys.
things.
That's what I was looking for. I was like the tough guys. No, not the tough guys. That's what he's advocating for. The dangerous guys.
Well, see, I suppose tough can look very different from Christian tough versus dangerous boy tough.
Yeah.
Rough and tough and adventurous and stuff. And whoa.
So the next segment, provider, made me laugh a little.
Oh gosh.
Because I was like, oh, Aaron.
Stop it. Why?
So he must be a provider. And
he must have a job.
So there's 3 bullet points in here, right?
Yeah.
The first one, you have this. You must have a job. He must have a job. You got a job. Okay, cool.
Sort of, yeah.
He must have a work ethic. I'm going to assume based on the work that you've been there so long and they're trying to get you on the what is that? The forklift
truck, yeah,
and all that,
certified.
That you probably have some work ethic and all that. They haven't fired you yet.
Yeah, yet.
But the last one's what made me laugh when I was thinking about you. He must have a plan.
Yeah, I know. I laughed when I read that too.
I was like, oh.
Well, that's what he's lacking.
I was like, Aaron does not have a plan. I know this because I have tried multiple times.
Hey, Aaron, so where do you see yourself in 10 years? What do you 5 years?
Not even the 10 year, the 5 year.
5 year, yeah. 5 years. Velcro.
And whereas at our job, they make us write out like what we plan to do in 5 years. Like we actually have to write long-term goal plans and all that. And I'm actually in the process of fulfilling one of those long-term goals. I'm actually taking it's gonna be a 10-month certification course that I'm in the process of taking. Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. So,
Wow.
it's one of those things of I have a plan and I have to get through it, and July 4th is really cutting into it because it's like, "Oh, yeah, we're not taking the week of July 4th off." I'm like, "Are you
What do you mean you're
serious?"
not taking that off?
So I have to get it ahead of the class, but regardless of the fact. So, yeah, this one was pretty simple. He must have a job, he must have a work ethic, and by work ethic, he means
Yeah.
not be lazy and all
Oof.
that.
Well, I have a hard time with that at times.
Oh, so do I, don't get me wrong.
Ugh. Whew.
And then,
Yeah, I did.
I laughed at this, well, I shouldn't say laughed at, but the first time I read it, I was like, "Wait, what?" And then I was like, "Oh, wait, now I understand." It's on page 150. And says, "In addition to talk without action," in other words, he's just talking about, ahead, people who like to talk a good talk and not actually have any action to back it up. But he says, "Dependence on others for provision is a perversion of biblical manhood." In other words, no taking handouts is what he essentially is what he's getting at here.
Oh. Oh, okay.
But
I was because I had
what do you have?
so before the must have a work ethic, I had a paragraph like kind of like just like boop. Whereas the being a provider is not about the amount of money one makes. There are men who make millions but don't provide for their families half as well as men hovering around minimum wage. Sure, they give their families more toys and gadgets, but that's not provision. Moreover, there are men who make a great deal of money with little effort who still fall short, okay, of biblical manhood, because they lack work ethic. Oh, okay, then which goes into work ethic.
Yep.
But what is it? Oh, especially significant is Solomon's warning that wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Proverbs 13:11. Wow. Uh, yeah, I guess the whole wealth gained hastily will dwindle is definitely true.
Oh yeah. And well, that seems to be everyone's kind of MO right now, especially the way the current
Uh-huh.
environment is right now in
Yes.
2022.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so then on to the work ethic. In other words, he's like, just don't be lazy.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, yes, that I finally get that. I get that. I shouldn't
Yeah.
say finally get that. I get that. And he talks about how Paul kind of shows that example. He says Paul makes it clear that he and the other apostles led by example in this area. This issue was so important to the apostle that he and those with him in Thessalonica chose not to live off of gifts from the church, opting to toil and labor instead. It is as though Paul anticipated this problem and chose not to accept support in this particular church plant in an effort to make this pressing point. In other words, he's saying, Paul could have easily gone to the church and said, "Hey, we're the apostles. We're here to grow the church. We want you to support us." And no, he instead said, "No, we're working, a 9 to 5 in addition to doing all this apostolic work."
Right.
And in other words,
Which,
it's good.
nah, I wouldn't say so.
What were you about to say?
Well, no, because I was just thinking, no, I was thinking of, don't be afraid to take gifts, but don't depend on them.
Right. It's one thing when it's a gift that's given,
Yes.
to you. It's another thing when you're going,
Please
I need
help,
this.
help, help, help.
And don't get me wrong, okay? This is not to say that there are times when people have things that come up in their lives beyond their control where they need help. An unexpected bill, an unexpected
Yeah,
surgery, an unexpected illness, and
yeah,
maybe they had, funds set aside, to cover emergencies, but we've all been there where it seems like it's just one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other, and
mhm.
things just go horrible, and all that savings and that extra money gets drained, and you're just like, now what?
Yeah,
And that does happen. And in those cases, help the people. That's why, a lot of churches have, like our church, we have a deacon fund where if someone needs assistance, we can give them money that is not reported on necessarily on where it goes,
right.
just to be able to help members of the church. And it's at the discretion of the deacons to hand that fund out and how much they hand out. with the anticipation that it's to help someone, especially maybe, you know, a random setback. Maybe they're just, they lost their, especially during COVID, right? Someone lost their job because the company closed or downsized or whatever. And then, they were just starting to get on their feet and that set them back. And now they're on the verge of like losing their house or losing electricity or whatever. And they need to
Yeah.
get that paid to be able to get that back going. So that
Yeah.
does happen. So there's a difference between depending on and living on solely handouts and a gift, and sometimes going, you know what, I need help to get over this current little crisis.
Yeah.
And in all those cases, except the always living on a handout thing, I'm like, yes, let's help the person. Let's do it. There's no shame in that. And he doesn't address that in particular in here, but I just wanted to address that as well. If you ever
Yeah.
pick up the book, don't feel shame in that of being like, I need help on this. Because we
Right.
all need help at certain points in our lives.
Yeah. 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 I laughed when I turned to the next page on 152 because I literally have he must have a plan underlined.
Yeah.
And then I have later underlined is the whole because oh man, I heard this from one of my computer teacher when I was at good old RCS, but it was failure to plan is planning to fail. I was like, dang it.
Yep.
This word's cut deep.
I laughed at this next phrase I'm going to say, and the reason I laughed was this was written back in 2009, right, or published back in 2009, so probably written by 05, and maybe even a little bit
Right.
beforehand started. This phrase, because I was like, this is so true of our current culture today. He's so right still. As I have said repeatedly, we are no longer raising women. We are raising men who happen to be biologically capable of having children. And I was like, oh, if that isn't current 2022 society, right then and there. Young couples come in with this big idea about how they're going to juggle two careers and eventually start a family. However, when real life hits, they often find themselves several years down the road with commitments that make a family seem like a distant impossibility. And I'm just like, yeah, I get it. And this, he must have a plan segment is really short because essentially he's like, plan.
Right.
Plan. And his plan is plan finances, budgeting, and the need to plan for the wife to take care of the children once they arrive. That's his idea of doing the plan. I was like, okay, I see where he's going. And we'll continue on that path of why he lost me. And then the next one, he must be a prophet/priest. And he goes, we've dealt with this in an earlier chapter. And I had to go, did we? And I was like, oh, wait, yes, we did talk about this way back in an earlier chapter, kind of like the whole, he must be prepared to lead like Christ. He must be a follower of Christ.
Right.
So I was like, okay, cool. I don't need to spend too much time in it. And honestly, I didn't spend that much time in it. The one thing that, I kind of look at his bullet points, his thing here, such as a man must pray with and for his family. I was like, okay, yep, that's a duh. And a man must preach to his family. And I was like, that bullet point I got there, I was like, that seems a little bit weird, but did you have anything that stuck out to you, sir?
Wait, he must preach to his family?
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, I'm with that bullet point, makes me think as far as for my family growing up, I guess there wasn't. I guess when I think of, I don't know. I guess I depends on what you think of what preaching is, because like obviously it's not like a whole Sunday morning preacher kind of thing going on. It's just it. There's definitely times where we would try and get together as a family to read or listen to something having to do with the Bible and stuff. Then we'd have a discussion afterwards and stuff. And then that's kind of, I guess, where the old man would in a sense, have moments of preaching and stuff like that, but it was never, and just even like in moments of where if I was being disobedient, if I was doing something wrong, those were preachable moments, or and preachable teachings,
Teachable.
were teachable
Yeah.
moments. Um, so I mean that's I guess that's definitely something I would say is important. I guess I yeah, I just wonder on how people interpret that as what
Yeah.
is preaching to your kids or your family.
Yeah, and the way I originally read it, and that's why I said I was like, okay, yeah, it was like literally like a preaching thing, but he kind of breaks it down to where it's like family worship. I'm like, okay, I get that,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I don't think it had to be its own bullet point. It could have been mixed in with must pray with and for his family because that's part of worship as well.
Yeah.
So
Right, right.
that was just my thought, and that's where I'm like, okay. And in the back of my head, I literally went, okay, he's trying to pad out some pages.
Yeah. For sure.
But was there anything else in chapter 8?
No, I mean, what you just said was nothing was at bottom. Well, no, not bottom. At top of 157, where it says, "Nothing will spur a father toward godly spiritual discipline in his own walk with Christ more than leading his family in worship." Um,
Yeah, that's from James Alexander in his book Thoughts on Family Worship.
yeah, yeah. And then I just liked. I don't know. When I was at the end of this, when I read this, I was just thinking, I was like, oh, I mean, that'd be nice, a cute little decoration or what I don't know what it's specifically called. But for how like the Christian families have like the verses
Yeah.
out on, when reading that last one, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I was like, oh boom. There's a cute little
Yep, and a lot of people have that there. Yeah,
oh for
I've seen
sure.
that plaque in a lot of
Yeah.
places. All right. So chapter 9. And chapter 9 is the second to last chapter. By the way, chapter 10 was just a weird chapter title name.
Dude, I don't remember what
Can't
10
find
is.
one, build one.
Build one. Oh, that's
And I was like, where is this going?
Right.
So chapter 9.
I don't think I really had anything
On chapter 9?
Oh, wait, no, I had a couple things.
Chapter 9 is where he completely lost me.
What did I have on?
And where I completely said,
yeah,
no.
Okay.
So, chapter 9 is don't send a woman to do a man's job.
Right.
So, the first page and a half is essentially this story. It's a story about Jack, a guy. He's like, oh, he's well built, he's athletic, he puts all of his guns out with this cleaner, he's gonna clean them.
Yeah.
And this boy comes up right on time, and introduces himself to the man. And the man says, "Come in, sit down," and starts cleaning his guns and basically
the whole intimidation thing going on.
Yeah, it's like, "Do you remember what time I told you to have her back?" "Yes, sir, 11:30. Don't worry, I'll take good care of her and get her back long before that." Right? And you're going on like, man, he's going all out for this guy to date his daughter. And then he reaches into Jack, the man, reaches into his pocket and gives him the keys to a brand new 6.5 liter 12-cylinder all-wheel drive Lamborghini. And I was just like, Okay. And he goes, "I want her back without as much as a scratch." He goes, "Of course, the story is absurd. Really, you don't say."
Yeah. Very.
Who you would ask would give the keys to a brand new Lamborghini to a 16-year-old young man?
No.
Well, and he goes, "Well, I have a better question. Who would be foolish enough to think their daughter was worth less than any car? It should be as unthinkable for us to turn over our 16-year-old daughters over to this young man as it is to us to contemplate giving him a depreciating hunk of metal."
Well, I mean, it could actually be going up in value depending on the car.
Well, especially nowadays.
Bodie.
But anyways, he goes, "I believe modern dating is no more than glorified divorce practice."
Oh, jeez. Yeah, I don't remember reading that.
Yep. "Our children are becoming serial monogamists who give themselves away over and over again to unworthy candidates who break their hearts, scar their psyches, and often cause them to sin against God. Something simply has to give." Bridget and I, this is where he lost me. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm being honest here.
Yeah.
Bridget and I have decided long ago that dating would not be a part of our children's lives. We both bear the scars of traveling that road ourselves and believe it is our duty to guard our children from these pitfalls as much as possible. Thus, our daughter, who is 18 at the time of this writing, has never been on a date with any man.
Yeah, that's messed up.
And then he continues on talking about it and goes, there will be a time when my daughter's ready for marriage and thus ready to evaluate potential suitors. At that time, we will guide her in the courtship process with as many safeguards as possible. But for now, I view sending her out on dates with young men as unwise at best.
Hmm.
I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
Where was this next here? I wish I would have actually highlighted instead of forgetting my notepad at home.
Oh,
where I write down my Marco tablet.
Yep.
I remember I forgot that at home, and I was like, oh, and it didn't sync up, so I don't have it on my.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay. Sending our daughter on dates with young men without benefit of a chaperone is sending a woman to do a man's job.
Yeah, that's a little funky.
He goes, by that, I mean, it is my job to protect my daughter and to walk with her in the decision-making process that leads to marriage. If she is out unchaperoned with a young man, I am asking her to do alone what God called me to do with her.
So, when does he have? I can't remember. Does he have?
He has like 10 kids.
No. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But does he have? I guess I can't remember if he had any like kind of scriptural stuff backing any of that up.
The first time when he gets to scriptural stuff is this next segment.
Protecting your daughter's purity?
Yep, protecting daughter's purity. He goes, quite simply, our jobs as fathers is to present our daughters to their husbands as virgin brides. And he quotes Deuteronomy 22:13-21.
Because I just... Yeah, I guess I definitely think that's way beyond, that's beyond a helicopter parent kind of thing.
Right.
Because it's in which helicopter parents are always feel like it's just like, you might be a little extreme on this.
And I said, like I said, this is where he lost me on some of his things. Because yes, I am all for protecting, he goes, protect your daughter's purity. Okay. In the end, that is not so much a father thing. The father can help guide.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a difference between guiding and...
But at the same time, it's also on her. You can't control a person's individual thoughts. You can't control a person's individual desires. You can't control what they do outside of your vision. If you are always there saying no, and you're building this barrier where they're not able to do things and to screw up and mess up on their own, when that barrier is finally gone, they're going to do that of which to screw up and mess up on their own. And they're going to go and do exactly what you told them not to do.
Yeah.
Teenagers are going to do that. 18-year-olds are going to do that easily.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Once they get that first taste of freedom, it's time to go.
Look, the Amish and the Mennonites, right? They have Ruspringa or whatever it is.
I do no idea.
Do you know what that is?
No.
So, Mennonites, Amish, and all that, they're very, very, no technology, very devout, religious group of people. They have, essentially what they have is a year when they're a young adult where they can go out into the world and experience the rest of the world, however they want, have sex, do drugs, whatever they want to do. And then at the end of that year, decide, do they want to go back to their original home or do they want to continue living out in this world that they've been in?
Yeah.
A good majority actually end up going back, but they give them the chance to see what it's like, even outside the confines of their small little environment.
That's strange. I never knew that.
Yeah. So, because you're asking, does he have any biblical, references, right?
Yeah.
And I said he uses Deuteronomy 22:13-21. What do you know what's in there in that verse?
No.
Let's look at Deuteronomy 20:20-21. And what, so it says, it starts off with, but if the thing is true, right? In other words, the daughter to be, of a man is not a virgin. before she's wed. Okay. But if a thing is true, that evidence of virginity was not found in the young woman, then they shall bring out the young woman to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she has done an outrageous thing in Israel by whoring in her father's house. So you shall purge the evil from your midst.
Yeah, we don't do that today.
No. And I'm like,
That's
at least he thankfully says, "Oh, I'm not suggesting we do this." He goes, "I'm not saying we stone people, but I am saying that this is relevant to our discussion." I'm like, how?
right.
And he goes on and says, he's talking about why we don't do it anymore, blah, 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 blah. He goes, how do we apply the principles in this text without resorting to legalistic interpretations? Okay. He goes, first, we know that the principle of premarital purity is a new covenant principle because the New Testament teaches it clearly and repeatedly. Honestly, I would have gone with these verses instead of the verse that he went with in Deuteronomy. So he goes with Matthew 15:9, Acts 15:20, 29, 21, 25, Galatians 5:19 through 21, Ephesians 5:3 through 11, Colossians 3:5, and 1 Thessalonians 4:2 through 8, which are all the more better than the stoning passage.
Yeah.
I was like, I was like, okay, I get it, and I agree with his next statement. All sex that takes place outside the confines of covenant marriage is sin. Yes, okay,
Yeah.
and yes, he does talk about this word. It even includes like the thoughts and all that too. And I'm like, yes, I agree. Watching porn, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Not appropriate, not what we need to do there, right? And then he goes on and talks about that. And he goes on and talks about that, the Deuteronomy 22 and how it's essentially it's the principle that, don't have premarital sex. I'm like, okay, fine. I get that. That's good. And then he goes on and talks about John 8, the woman who was brought to Jesus to be stoned to death because they were following the Old Testament law.
Right.
And Jesus essentially says,
no,
we're not going to do that. And he goes, well, one, Jesus acknowledges the woman had sinned, duh, and admonished her to go sin no more. Infinitely better textual use than Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
On that. I get why you use it because it's this big shock and awe value, but it doesn't line up properly right there.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on any of that there, sir?
No. You done pretty much did it.
All right.
Yeah, I guess with the whole next thing I have is for protecting the daughter's heart and stuff like that. Like, all the I feel like it's the ideas of all that is good, and as a father, you should be doing what you can to make sure she does what is right and what is best for her. But yeah, it's where you draw the line of where you're overdoing it and doing more harm than good, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. I go back to, because I remember hearing this all the time growing up, the whole thing about like immodest dress in school and that, and then, people go, well, the girl shouldn't be wearing that short of a skirt or something. And then them going, well, the guy should be not thinking those things on his own, sort of thing. Even if he sees it, he should behave himself.
Yeah.
Ultimately, guess what? Both are true. Okay.
Yeah.
And guess what? The daughter is going to have to learn that as well in here. He wants to protect the daughter so much from all this stuff. I'm like, she's going to have to eventually learn these things as well.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not the father's role to kind of just like, nope, stop. He goes on, how wise is it for us to encourage our daughters to present themselves to young men in unsupervised premature dating situations if our goal is their purity? We must make sure we are not tempting the Lord our God. We must also make sure we are not tempting our daughters.
That's weird.
Yeah, it was really weird. And then that's when he starts the protect our daughters' hearts thing. While it is fundamentally important that we protect our daughter's virginity, is perhaps more important that we protect our hearts. And then this is talking about, the thoughts and what we're doing. And he's talking about, women who get married who are technically virgins, but they've done everything else.
Like under the sun, beforehand, stuff like that.
Yeah, they've done everything else in the world except lose their virginity.
Yeah. Which it's, I mean, so that is, I guess, in my mind, something important to be very careful
Right.
of how intimate and how much you give yourself away to others that like outside of outside of sex. Um uh
Yeah, but
and
they're
during a dating relationship. But
yeah,
what
but as I say, but they're technically a virgin literally means like they could do oral sex. They could do all
right, yeah,
that.
no. See,
So
that's yeah, that's I guess in my mind, um well see no, I gotta be careful on that. Because I mean it doesn't take much at all. Well, especially get a guy's motor running kind of thing to say. Um, but it is, I guess I would say it's important, yeah, to be careful how intimate you allow yourself to get, or how I guess the big thing is, yeah, touchy feely and just whatnot. How far you get in those lines with someone you're dating, especially depending on how long it's going on for. I
yeah,
guess like obviously the longer it's been going, hopefully the more so you're thinking about getting ready to pop the question kind of thing. But I mean, yeah, it's because that's what I mean. The more you allow yourself, like the more you give of yourself to a person during a relationship, if things don't end up working, the more that's gonna hurt a lot when it comes to an end. But obviously, it's not to say that you don't give any of yourself in a relationship, but it's like, be mindful of it, I suppose.
right.
Yeah.
All right. So any other thoughts on protecting the heart?
Nah, no.
Okay. Yeah, and it really does come down to essentially, the thoughts and that, and he in here he talks about finding a foot locker of his that had all these like memories of old girlfriends or whatever, and how ashamed he was when he found it and how they had an argument over it and everything. And I was just like, in a way, she sounds a little jealous, to be honest.
Right.
Because I'm like, that, that happened in the past. They're married now, but that's just me. And I guess
No,
it,
that makes
if,
sense.
if, if, if we were talking,
'Cause
he'd be like, well, you're immature. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm immature. Yeah, anyways. Oh, wait, you have a Henry. Never mind. So then the next one is protect your daughter's focus. And I just about bust out laughing because I was like, seriously, dude, you're now trying to control her time.
Oh, I even
So he goes, it is important that we protect their
oh,
focus. So many young women devote inordinate amounts of time to dating relationships. They spend every waking moment with their boyfriends or thinking about being with them. There are dates, visits, and extensive phone conversations, not to mention endless hours of daydreaming, fantasizing, and romanticizing. Like,
okay.
yeah, I'm like, okay.
Right.
I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. Young love is like that. It's okay to be like that. Spend a little bit of extra time thinking about the other person because
Right.
you kind of
You
like them.
yeah, and you I mean, all things go right, you're about to be spending a lifetime with them. So better get used to
You
it.
would hope so, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and he talks about Gossip Girl and Desperate Housewives, and I was just like, no, I don't even think you even know what that means. But yes, go for it. But then he goes on and he goes, okay, so what should an unmarried woman's, especially a young woman's, focus be? He goes, it should be what Corinthians 7 says. And I was like, okay, interesting. And he goes, this is what a young woman should focus on. And I just kind of go, you're not finding any young woman who's going to do this, honestly. These are good guidelines. I get what you're saying. I get what the Bible is saying. I'm not discounting the Bible at all. But at the same time, I think maybe you're taking some things out of context and maybe we need to read the full context. Because here's what he says.
Yeah.
He goes, the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. Like, yes, I get what what he's saying, but in the whole context of things, if you read about it, that Paul then goes on to talk about how for some people it's meant to be single their entire lives, and how you can use that and everything. And I'm just like, okay, cool. And he goes, the picture Paul paints in this passage is of a woman with a singular focus, not a woman who has a serious boyfriend with whom she plays house in her teen years. I was like, I was like, okay. I assure you the church is not in need of more girls in their late teens and early 20s who are investing their lives in relationships with young men. What we do need, however, is an army of young women with laser sharp focus on the Lord and his bride. We need more young women serving, praying, and giving. Okay. I was making sure. I thought I read a comma. Nope, that's a period. We need more young women developing and using their spiritual gifts and talents with which they have been blessed. Like, yeah, okay, cool.
Right.
I get it, but they're going to date. Not everyone's going to go with your courtship model when your 18-year-old is like, Daddy, can Josh come over and we have dinner tonight?
Oh my gosh. Oh.
And his 18-year-old daughter has never been on a date, period.
That's weird.
And won't be unsupervised with a young man even after she's 18. I was like,
see, at that point, it's like, because it's like, that just tells me you don't trust your daughter to do what's right.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. Eventually, your kid will have to learn and grow up on their own, because if this is the person that you say, yes, you may marry her, and yes, you may date my daughter, this is that same guy, they're going to fight. They're going to have arguments. They're going to do things wrong. And they can't go, Daddy, 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 protect me every time. I'm sorry.
I'm near death. No.
I'm like, no, that doesn't work out. And to be honest, as a guy who was on the receiving end of that one time, it sucked. I hated it.
Receiving end.
Where I was the guy and she would go, Daddy, 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 about everything. And I was like, no, it sucked.
Yeah.
It was almost emasculating, because it was like, we were dating, definitely not anywhere near teens, in our 30s.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
And it was just like, you're going to your dad about every single little thing. No.
Right.
I was like, your dad's not part of this relationship.
Yeah.
And your dad is your dad. And, if we move beyond it, yes, he would be my father-in-law and part of the family, but he's not in this relationship. And that's what this guy's doing too. And I'm just like, no. Maybe that's why I have such a negative attitude towards what this guy's writing, if I'm being 100% honest.
Yeah. I guess I'm... Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe I'm a bit jaded. I don't know.
Right. Right. No, because I guess I can't, like... Again, I don't know. I'm just wondering, is there like a balance sort of deal where it's like, yeah, you don't want her going to her dad and like for validation for every single thing that goes on. I guess that's different though than there's a difference between that and then like occasionally going to your dad for advice on something.
Yeah, those are two completely different things.
Totally different.
Yeah. So any other comments on chapter 9?
No.
Okay. Chapter 10, the one that had the most confusing title, and I was a little concerned going in.
Yeah.
Can't find one, build one.
Yeah. Build.
And I was like,
build a boy.
And this is where he talks about his Suburban, filling it up with $96 worth of gas.
Yeah.
And he goes, 96 American dollars.
American dollars. USD,
America.
Baby. America.
It was so like right-wing conservative reading this, and I was just like, oh, can you be any more stereotypical?
Dude, I cracked up as soon as it said where he turned on or whatever, like the radio, so he goes, Fox News came.
Yeah. So as I climbed back into the truck, I started up, and blaring out my radio was Fox News host Neil Cavuto talking about the cost of oil.
I died.
I listened to him in his guest debate about alternative fuels, higher efficiency vehicles, hybrids, and the ubiquitous stop being dependent on foreign oil slogan.
Yeah.
I was like, oh boy.
I
was just like, can you be any more stereotypical?
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah.
I died.
But essentially what he's doing that for is because he's talking about how there was less supply and more demand for oil at the time,
Yeah.
hence the rising gas prices and all that stuff. And he goes, unfortunately, when it comes to biblically qualified husbands, again, you have to read the previous 9 chapters to find out what he considers a biblically qualified husband. We can't do much about demand. Thousands of Christian women need godly husbands. And no matter what happens in Massachusetts and California, there are no alternative sources for these women. Well, now there are, but let's not dwell on that. I'm not going to get into that right now. So the typical U.S. congregation draws an adult crowd that's 61% females, 39% male.
That's crazy to me.
Well, look at it this way. If you're a single guy,
You got good odds, man.
odds are forever in your favor.
You got choices, my guy.
As many as 90% of the boys who are being raised in church will abandon it by their 20th birthday.
That was the shocker for me in this.
Really? It
chapter.
was a shocker for
Well,
you.
not a shocker,
What-
but just like that was like the worst. For me, it was just like the saddest part thinking of that statistic.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Why?
Uh-huh.
That's a lot of kids just calling it quits.
Can I be honest with you?
No. I don't like being honest. Kidding. I know you thought that was going to be me.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But you've told me that before.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because I keep going back to our, I call it our standoff conversation.
Oh my
Where we were standing
gosh.
out, where just
The-
out,
this-
out of the blue, you messaged me like, I'm not going to be there tonight, for
Yeah.
music for youth group and that. Just out of the blue, out of nowhere, last minute. And you weren't at youth group, so I came by and swung by your house afterwards.
I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to even talk to anybody.
Yep.
No.
And we literally stood on opposite sides of the
It
lawn
was so awkward.
chatting.
Just thinking about this.
And that I was like, hey, would you at least come to breakfast? And then we went to breakfast, and then that's where we had a big, long conversation in the parking lot of the restaurant. But yeah, there was definitely a point in time where I was like, Aaron might have been one that 90%.
Yep. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm glad I wasn't.
Me too. But I mean,
Yeah, it's still like, yeah, even wow, remembering that, just what the heck was going on in my mind?
there was a lot going on at that time with you.
There was,
So
there still is to
Well,
a point, but there
oh,
always will be.
there always will be, right?
But it's just, yeah, it does. I guess no, I shouldn't. It does sadden me that that's a thing, and it's like, which I'm sure so many, youth pastors and youth leaders and stuff are thinking like, how do we help these kids understand more, one, I guess, about who God is and just everything about it, and keep them involved versus just letting them meh. Which, I mean, yeah, again, ultimately it's an individual person's choice,
Right.
but it's like, how do we, like, what can we do, I guess, in terms to help keep them around and keep them interested into it without sacrificing any truth or anything like that.
And it's getting harder and harder each generation.
It is. It's nuts.
Yep. Because truth is becoming more and more and more and more and more relative.
Mm-hmm.
So after that wonderful statistic and all that, he goes on to talk about his bullet points. His bullet points, the first one, raise godly young men. I was like, okay, I get
Cool.
that. In
Yep.
other words, have kids and raise them up in the way of God.
Yeah.
Cool. I get that 100%. Right. And he goes, oh, and here's my sub bullet points on this. He goes, God requires it of you, for you to raise, for not the having kids and having boys necessarily, but, raising them up in the right ways and, godly way. Right. And he goes, it'll bring you much joy. I was like, okay, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
He brings them some New Testament verses where it essentially says, "I long to see you that may be full of joy." Essentially, what it's talking about here is Paul writing to Timothy, and saying, "Hey, I can't wait to see you. It will bring me much joy. I can't wait to see how what you've been going." Because essentially, kind of Paul kind of adopted him, essentially a younger guy, and helped him out, with the various things, right? Um, this one was the no one can do it like Dad can. I was like.
Well,
He goes, fathers have a very unique role to play in the development of their sons. Our wives, our pastors, our sons' friends, and others can teach them only so much. Only ultimately, man making is up to dad. I was like, okay, but let's go back to that stat where how many people are without fathers in their homes. Are you then disqualifying all
right.
those guys from being able to?
Exactly. There should be a father figure.
Yes,
It doesn't have to be the father, a father himself.
yeah, and in I forget what I think it was the previous chapter. It talks about where he went to live with his uncle because his dad wasn't around all the time.
Yeah.
He went to live with his uncle, and his uncle was like a Marine drill instructor.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
he's like
Yeah.
he didn't have to yell. He was stern and you followed,
Right.
and that was a great influence on him. I was like, yes, cool.
Yeah.
It's like I agree, 100%, with these things, in the it will bring you much joy. I was the first time I read that, I was like, what? And I was like, okay, read the first sentence. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. 3 John 4. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay.
Absolutely.
I see John's doing that. And I get it. It's the
Mhm.
same with like me and you, man. Like I told you recently, the one thing that I had asked of you long ago
Is
was you pay it forward in a way. In other words, you find someone to kind of help through things and mentor things as well. And without even realizing it, you're like, "Oh wait, I am doing that."
Yeah.
Without even
Yeah.
realizing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, "See, that was the one thing I asked that you do, and you did it.
Look
So
at
congratulations." And it does bring me joy in seeing that. I'm not your dad. I don't try to be your dad. Although there are
Right.
times where it seemed like I kind of had to be a dad like. I had to be dad like at times.
Yeah.
It really did seem like it, but
Yep.
I
You
tried
did
not.
well.
I tried not to. I didn't want to be, but I am glad to see how that has happened for you, and then how you are now starting to help the next person down the line.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
It's so weird.
By the way, the next bullet point was just the first
Uh-oh.
time I read it, I was like, I'm in too modern of America where this could be taken the wrong way.
Oh gosh.
Surround yourself with young men. I was like, what is he talking about? And I was like, oh, okay. That's what I said. In the modern America, it could be taken the wrong way, right?
You got me thinking about Letterkenny now.
Jeez. Stop thinking about that show right now.
I can't.
But so nothing really kind of in there was like really all that standing out. Yeah. It's like, oh, your daughter's mate may come from your circles. Okay, yeah, cool. I understand that.
Yeah.
Essentially it's like get to know the younger men in your community, like the church and all that, because your daughter may
Potentially.
choose someone from those things, right?
Right.
Uh
Which I guess that's not bad.
no, it's not,
It's not a bad thing to do. But don't get weird about it.
yeah, and so then it's like seek out young men at work. And essentially he's like, find men at your job that would be a good son-in-law for you.
See,
I was like, okay, that's starting to get creepy.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he goes, have young men in your home. I was like, we should take advantage of every opportunity we have to use our homes as evangelistic outposts. We must also use them as places to refresh the brethren. Okay. Right.
Right.
I've found that single young men appreciate opportunities to eat and fellowship with families. I know I did when I was a young man. There's perhaps no better place for us to model godly manhood and biblical family life. This is also a great way to allow our daughters to interact with young men in a safe environment. This is both useful for instruction and cultivation. That just sounds creepy.
That does.
As a matter of instruction, it is very helpful to watch our daughters interact with young men and give them feedback. Do our daughters need to learn to be more modest? Do they need to work on being better conversationalists? Are they too familiar, argumentative, or informal with young men? Are they flirtatious? These are questions parents will never be able to answer unless they are engaged in social settings where their daughters are interacting with young men. Our homes are perfect training grounds for these kinds of issues. Of course, the same is true for the evaluation of the young man. The home is also a great place to cultivate relationships with potential suitors. As mentioned in the previous chapter, it is unwise to allow these types of relationships to grow without the benefit of oversight and supervision of some sort. Seeing a young man in our home is a great way to cultivate a relationship without abandoning our responsibility. It's just like,
Yeah.
this is where I'm like, you've taken helicopter parenting to extreme where you're helicopter parenting both the kids and you're inserting yourself into their dating relationship.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
that's how I was like, he lost me.
I guess I'd be curious to talk with a family we know that daughter is currently dating someone and all that kind of fun stuff, whatever.
Let's see how much they agree with this.
Well, no, not that, but just to see like what I guess, like because I'm sure he's over quite often.
Yes.
Well, often enough.
Yep. There's a difference between him being over and them interacting and them.
Yeah.
That's the only time when they interact.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's wrong.
That's the difference.
That's wrong. I guess I would say. But it's like, cause I mean, depending on how dinner goes or whatever it is goes, I mean, it would be good to be observant on, I guess, their actions.
Right.
But then, so I guess, as far as a father goes to his, but it's like, be observant of how his daughter acts. And if there's anything that comes off as maybe wrong on how she's acting, it'd be good to point that out as far as to maybe even what the guy would be doing. Be like, hey, maybe this isn't good, or I don't think this is right. Blah, blah, blah. But I guess, it'd be better, just make them aware of stuff. And I guess obviously allow them to think it out and stuff or whatnot. But I mean, obviously, if something's clearly wrong, then be like,
yeah, and that is a good, there's nothing wrong with, the guy or whatever spending time with the girl's family. Nothing wrong with that. That's great. Especially because you see things like that.
Important.
where I'm having conniptions with this book is where he's like, no, this is the only way in which they're seeing each other.
No, that's not
that's where I'm having issues.
Yeah, that's not.
But that really, and then I'll just say with the conclusion where he talks about the next thing, essentially just kind of talks about why essentially interracial marriages or dating or courtships or whatever are fine and everything. And I find it, I don't know, funny or weird or whatever. His biggest argument for why racism in dating and courtship and interracial is good, he goes, well, if you do it only by race, then it limits your dating potential pool. And I was like, seriously?
Right.
That was like one of your big points. I was like, no.
Oh, I guess I didn't think of that as a big point.
Yeah, that was one of his main ones.
Oh, okay. I guess, for my mind didn't read it like that.
But
because I thought for as far as that goes, like I thought, like, man, how messed up that is to think that.
Oh, but to be fair, that used to be a thing in the United States. And, and that was a horrible part of our past and our history.
Absolutely.
So
and that's not even that far off.
No,
either. That's the worst part about it.
Yeah. So any other thoughts, things that stuck out from you from chapter 10 or conclusion?
Culture is taking too long to produce men, which I mean, I would agree.
Yeah, but did you read through all that where he's talking about that?
Right.
So that's on page 203 of the book. So where he says, John Quincy Adams was an ambassador by the age of 14. That seems hard to believe.
That's crazy.
I need to look that up because that's a young kid, right?
Yeah.
Today we consider men adolescents for whom living at home and being taken care of by their parents is acceptable well into their 20s.
Don't look at me.
Men used to marry in their teens. Now they wonder if they are ready in their 30s. We have an epidemic of immature men in our culture. We are simply taking too long to turn boys into men. Our forefathers may have died younger, but they lived longer in the process.
Yeah.
And then here's where I talk about where it's kind of one of his main points, because it all this up until now culminates into this point up here. Between the rise of the pragmatic romantic view of marriage, the emasculation of young men, and he talks about feminism as emasculating young men,
Yeah.
and our insistence on prolonging adolescence, living into 20s with your adult parents, there's a woefully narrow field of biblically qualified marriage candidates. How then can we justify narrowing the field even further by imposing unbiblical standards like ethnicity?
Right. No, and that's, I mean, yeah, I get his point to that. That it's said that some people would make ethnicity a big deal as to far as who you can date or not date thing.
At that point, it
But
should
yeah.
be a preference thing, not a biblical thing.
Yeah, right. I guess the whole thing with also just I don't know, this random, I guess, thought comment just came to my head. It was where he talks about how, you know, like men used to marry in their teens, now they wonder if they're ready in their 30s. Well, thanks to your book, that's making me think that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I mean, yes, men need to be men and stuff like that. Well, need to grow up and become men and whatnot, but it's man, I don't even know. It's not just men, obviously. There's so much going wrong across the spectrum with everyone. So, I mean, times are changing, things are getting different. And it's we're trying to figure out how to go about things the best way we think is right.
Yep.
So it's not like you can't put an age to a time where like you're supposed to be married by this time, or you should be having this many kids because this is what's the best, or what. You can't put, I guess, barriers or like expectations on that kind of stuff.
So let me ask you this, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah.
If you had to give this book a scale on a scale of 0 to 5, what would you give this book overall?
Oh no. It's funny because I remember at first I was like, oh man, this is really cool. But after going through it again, it's just like, interesting.
So what would you give it?
I mean, 3 at most.
Okay, so you'd give it a 3.
2 to 3.
Pick.
It's because
2.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's like there's some stuff that I feel like is good, but also what as you say, where it really starts to lose you with all that stuff. It's like, yeah, it seems very.
If I had been reading this only up until chapter 6, I'd say like a 3 or 4, like a 3.5.
Right.
As soon as I introduce 7 through 10 into the mix, this drops down to a 2.
Yeah.
For me. And the reason is specifically 7 through 10. I cannot abide by that. I cannot get behind that.
Yeah.
Call me whatever. He would go, oh, you're just not following the biblical order. I don't care if he goes, you're not following the biblical order. I'm going to have to say I cannot do that myself. I could not do that to my kids if I ever have kids, which I probably won't. But I wouldn't even expect that, like on like the youth through kids and all that. Be like, nope. Only date around your parents.
Yeah, it's
like that.
There's something wrong with that.
Culture has changed way too much. But all right.
Yeah, man.
Any closing comments, thoughts?
I guess I liked to end it. I did like the conversation he had with his uncle. And with, I guess, just being a Christian in general, not having to do with, being a man and being something, being a man that a woman would look for, whatever, all stuff set aside. Just being a Christian in general, is this line made me think when his uncle says, you have to remember what they're being trained for, when he's talking about these like the Marines or whatever,
right,
in camp and stuff, and how intense and how brutal some of their training is. And it is remembering what they're getting ready for. You have to really work at it hard to be prepared for all the tough stuff it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's gonna happen eventually regardless. So as a Christian, being ready to be able to fight temptation, how to love the biggest thing I think is loving those that you don't think are deserving of love. Is a huge one. It's patience and just the Christian life. It's tough.
Mhm.
It ain't easy. So especially when you're on your own for periods of time, I don't know, reading that just made me realize how much more serious it is to be in the Word, to be studying the Word, learning about God, Christ, and all that stuff, to realize being trained to be fighting the devil, I guess, in grand scheme of things. It's his work that we're fighting against, and his work is nasty.
Yep.
So that was probably for me a good way to end it because it made me think of that at least.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron,
Yeah.
this is definitely an interesting
It's the endeavor.
experiment.
Yeah.
Are we going to do another book?
I hope so. It'd be fun.
All right. We'll figure out what book 2 is of Aaron's book club here on User Words Podcast.